What's up, guys? How's it going? MikeTheTech here, and today I'm going to show you how to set up Steam Remote Play on two computers. Now, I actually have a computer back there. You can kind of see it. It's running in the background. This is the one we're going to be connecting remotely to actually test everything out and make sure it works. So you can see the setup on both sides, and you can see if I actually turn on my other screen, you can see that we actually have the other computer right there. So we can switch between them, and you can see exactly how to install it on both devices. So before we get started, if you're watching this video, chances are you're not subscribed because 99% of you are not subscribed. And that's a pretty bad number. So if you like this one, be sure to click on that sub or thanks button below. Speaking of thanks, huge shout out to Miss Mo Dav. Thank you so much for being a channel member. If you want to get shout outs like this, click on that join button below. So let's go ahead and get into the actual setup. First things first, you have to get logged in to Steam on both computers. So on this computer, I'm already logged in, as you can tell. And then on this computer, let's go ahead and make sure that I'm logged in. All right, so now Steam is open on this one as well, and we're logged in. So let's jump over to our first computer. On this computer, this is our host device. This is the device that we want to have the best graphics card, and it's sitting at home in a corner somewhere, and it's just the ultimate gaming PC, and you want that to stream out to all your devices, your phone, your Chromebook, whatever you want to stream out to, you want to stream that out. So this is that device. You're going to go into Steam and go into Settings. In your settings, you're going to go down to Remote Play. And under Remote Play, you want to make sure Enable Remote Play is enabled. Now that's kind of a given, but that's the first step. So enable Remote Play on that device. And if you're logged into both, you should see the other computer already show up here. And you can see that Remote Play is disabled on that device. So we'll have to go over and turn that on at some point. Then we can go ahead and set a pin. Let's go ahead and do that now. And let's just choose a code, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll confirm that. So now we have a pin for it in case it ever asks us for one. Now let's go ahead and go to all devices here where it says allow direct connect IP sharing, and make sure that automatic or all devices is set to true, because that's going to give you the fastest connection. Rather than connecting through the remote internet network, if that's available, if you are on the same network as the device, it will connect directly through the IP, and that should allow a much better speed on your network. Then you want to enable advanced host options, because we're the host on this machine. So let's enable advanced host options, and let's go over what settings are offered here. We have play audio on host. This is almost always going to be off because you don't want it playing audio on your gaming machine. You want it playing on your phone or whatever device you're actually streaming to. So leave this off. Change desktop resolution to match streaming client. This is actually really useful. If you have a Steam Deck, for example, that's 1280 by 800, this will automatically change the resolution to that 1280 by 800. That means, one, it's going to look great on your device, but two, if that's smaller than your actual display at home on your gaming machine, then it's actually going to be easier for your GPU to render those frames, because you're not trying to render a 4K quality stream on a 800p device. You're only trying to render an 800p stream on an 800p device, and it's going to run a lot better. Then dynamically adjust capture resolution to improve performance. You can turn this on if you're having issues. If you're fully comfortable that your machine is capable of rendering those frames, you can turn this off. But otherwise, this will kind of lower the resolution in some of those scenes that are using a lot of GPU power. Maybe if you have 1080p running, it'll move down to 900p for a little bit while it tries to keep those frames up. And then once you're in another area that isn't as dense, maybe it'll go back up to 1080p. It's a good way to make sure that your streaming quality doesn't degrade and you don't lose any input latency or anything like that, because input latency is bad and you don't want to have that. So it's going to prefer to reduce latency and get you those visuals right away over trying to get you the most pretty frame. And I think that's more important, so I leave that on. And then you want to choose what kind of encoding you're going to use on your device. So I have an NVIDIA GPU, so I can turn on NVFBC capture on NVIDIA GPU. And then we want to enable hardware encoding. Again, I'm on NVIDIA, so I'm going to turn off AMD and Intel iGPU encoding, but depending on what device you're on, if you have an AMD GPU, you might want to turn that on. If you only have an Intel iGPU, you can turn that on as well, and it will still render those frames. Number of software encoding threads, you want to leave this automatic. This might seem like you want all of the threads available to encode, but that's not actually the case. When you're running a game, that game's going to need some threads of its own. It's going to need to be using your CPU and GPU. So in a sense, if your CPU can handle running the entire encoding process and streaming process on one thread, that's preferable, because then you have the rest of your CPU to handle all of the game. This is a really rudimentary way of saying it, but the rest of the CPU cores can handle the gameplay, because a lot of games aren't optimized for multi-core anyway, so they're only going to need like 4 or 5 maybe, and then you have this separate core that's actually streaming and doing all that hard work. So automatic is generally the best one to choose here. You can experiment with some of the numbers, but automatic I always recommend. You want to make sure to prioritize network traffic. This means that if family members watching Netflix or Hulu or something in another room, it's not going to prioritize theirs, it's going to prioritize yours, hopefully. If your router supports those protocols and quality of service stuff, then it will prioritize this traffic over other types of traffic. And that's all you have to set up here. Advanced client options is only for the other computer. So now that this is all set up, let's jump over to the other computer and see if we can actually play something. So we're going to switch. There it is. Now we are logged into Steam, and we're going to go to the same section. Let's go to Settings. Let's go to Remote Play. And you'll see that Remote Play is disabled here. Let's go ahead and enable Remote Play. And we're connected. This is because we're already logged in and authenticated. We don't have to apply a PIN or anything like that. That is for if you're using a Steam Link or another device that specifically connects directly, like a Steam Deck. Just like before, we want to allow direct connection IP sharing for all devices. And then this time we're going to enable advanced client options. Now this is where you're going to have to actually adjust some of these to your specific setup, but I'm going to go over what each of these means and what I recommend to apply to them. So video, this is your video quality. Do you want it to look really beautiful and maybe take a little bit longer to render and apply some latency, or do you want it to get to you really fast at the, loss of some quality? Generally, you want to stay with balanced because that's going to be the easiest, middle point. But honestly, sometimes I recommend using beautiful to start, and if it gives you problems, then drop down to balanced after and see if it runs well then. Because if it's going to work well on beautiful, why not use it there, right? Don't just assume it's not going to work. For audio, I definitely recommend using stereo here. Any of these 5.1 surround and all that stuff, generally the devices you're going to be playing on aren't going to have that anyway, and it's going to use more of your streaming bandwidth to send that higher quality audio stream over. For controller overlay, we can leave this as the default button, but you can change that if you want to choose a specific one. But the default button is generally fine, and that will bring up Steam in-game. The performance overlay, we can show icons or disable those. We can go ahead and leave that as show icons to show whether we're actually getting a good performance or not. It's in the corner of the screen, and it's like green if it's good, yellow if it's bad, and red if it's really bad. Those are useful to troubleshoot, especially towards the beginning. Once you have a good setup already, you can remove that, but I recommend leaving them on at least while you get started. For the bandwidth limit, now here's we can choose automatic, which is recommended, and that will kind of scan your network speed and see what the best thing to send. But let me give you some kind of background on what these numbers actually mean. When you're streaming to Twitch, for example, the maximum bit rate for any stream, even if it's 1080p, 60 frames a second, is 7 or 6 megabits per second. Or megabytes per second, either way you want to say it, essentially. This is 5 megabytes per second. This is how much data is stored per second of video. And the higher you get here, the more difficult it is not only for your machine to render, but also to send over the network. So generally, streaming at 15 to 20 is more than enough for a very high quality experience. If you start raising it above and just start testing your network limits, you're not going to notice that big of a difference at these higher bit rates. So I would generally recommend 20 there, and that should be, just fine. For frame rate limit, one thing I highly recommend is if you're streaming, you're getting 60 frames per second on the stream. So don't let your gaming PC have even if you have a 144 hertz monitor, you're not looking at it on that monitor. So limit your games to 60 frames per second. That way you're not putting your computer to so much work that it's going to be slower to actually send you that stream. You want it to have some power left over to render that stream and send it your way. So I generally recommend limiting to 60 frames per second. And then you can limit the resolution. This is generally okay at 1080p, but if you're streaming to a phone, a lot of phones have really dense, high resolution displays. So if you really want to stream to a high resolution display, you can raise it, but again, the higher the resolution, the harder it is for your network and PC to keep up. So generally 1080p is a good one to keep, because usually we're streaming to a lower res, or at least a regular gaming monitor. We definitely want hardware decoding on, and then HEVC video. If your GPU supports it, then we can turn that on as well. Now, let's go ahead and see how to start a game in Remote Play. Let's go to Library, and let's take a look at a game that we know is installed on the other computer. Here's Polygon. And we're going to go ahead and click on this little icon down here on the right-hand side of the play button, and you'll see that we have this computer or our desktop computer. And if I hit that desktop computer, it turns into stream. Now when I hit stream, the game starts, and there it is. Now if I control it, I can actually control the game itself and start playing the game as if it were installed on my own computer. But yeah, that's it for this one. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. And as always, have a great day. Peace. From conversations to games to interviews with a broader view. He keeps it fresh, always brings something new. It's MikeTheTech, 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 the architect, MikeTheTech, MikeTheTech, yeah, MikeTheTech, the architect,